Today is the PlayStation 2's 25th anniversary, and I know it's hard to believe that the console is 25 years old now, but it officially launched in the year 2000 on October 26th. So I thought it would be fun to come on today, talk about some of my memories of the PS2, talk about some of the early games, some of the launch titles, show some gameplay footage, and just reminisce on one of the best consoles of all time. So I think it only makes sense to start at the beginning with the box here. So this is my original PS2 box. And I gotta say, looking back at this box is a blast from the past. Love that royal blue color. Looked awesome on the shelves. And I think back then when you saw one of these in the game store, this is something you knew you wanted to have. So just an awesome box, awesome start to the PS2 console. And let's take a look at the actual console itself. So here we go again, my original PS2. And just so much nostalgia looking at this thing. And I gotta say, I always loved the look of the PlayStation 2. And I do wonder, what do other people think about it? But to me, I loved the look. I thought it was an awesome, upgrade from the original PlayStation, blacked out with some blue on there to kind of make it pop. And just so many great memories with this console. So you had, your two controller ports, two memory card slots, some USB ports. You had some ports on the back to hook up, your network, that type of thing. Little on and off switch. Nothing crazy here, but just, man, it really delivered on the look, the feel. And to me, I think the PS2 is one of my favorite looking Sony consoles of all time. If I had to rank them, I would probably put PS4 at the top. That's my favorite. PS4 to me was like the natural progression from the PS2. So I put PS4 at the top, then I put the PS2, then the original PlayStation, then maybe PS5 and PS3. Not really a fan of the look of the PS5 and PS3, but PS2 was awesome. So definitely happy to look back on this amazing console here. And what was cool about this console, I think it was the first console that ever allowed you to stand it up vertically. So you could put it this way, you could actually spin the little PlayStation logo there, and you could stand it up vertically, or you could put it horizontally, again, turn the logo, and set it up this way. So that was pretty cool. That was the first time I ever saw that. But what also made the PS2 so good was that it was backwards compatible. And you gotta realize that back then, backwards compatibility wasn't guaranteed. In fact, you didn't see it that much, right? Like GameCube wasn't backwards compatible with N64. Super Nintendo couldn't play Nintendo games, etc., etc. So again, Sony really delivered, and they really helped kind of push backwards compatibility. I mean, Nintendo was doing it on the handheld devices, but Sony delivered huge with backwards compatibility, and something they've continued to do to date. So shout out to Sony for that. But now I want to go in, talk about my first experience actually seeing a PS2. And I didn't actually get my PS2 on launch. My first memory seeing and playing a PlayStation 2 was actually at my cousin's house. So I remember sleeping over at his house one day, and his dad just gifted him a PS2. And I believe it was an early Christmas gift. So he just got lucky to get it early. And that was the first time I saw it unboxed, hooked up, laid my hands on it. And I remember the first game we played, the game that he got with his PS2, was Street Fighter EX3. And at that time, I was blown away. I had so much fun with that game. I loved it. I don't think people look back on it too fondly, but you got to remember when the PS2 was launched, released, I was maybe 10, 11 years old. So it was easy for me to get impressed, but I had never seen a Street Fighter game like that. I kind of skipped over the Alpha series on the PS1. So I really went from like the Super Nintendo Street Fighter 2 to Street Fighter EX3. And man, I was blown away. So fun playing it that night. Definitely never forget. But what I want to do is talk about the PS2 launch lineup, because the console launched with over 20 games. It had a big launch library. And it's interesting because if you think about launch titles these days for modern consoles, like let's take the Switch 2, for example, it had a really small launch lineup. You had Mario Kart World, and then what else? A few ports, right? but the PS2 launched with over 20 games and some great games. So, what I think will be fun is I want to talk about my 5 favorite PS2 launch titles, and I'm going to show some gameplay footage. So, it only makes sense to start with number 5, and that is Midnight Club. Now, Midnight Club Street Racing was released by Rockstar Games and Angel Studios. It was an open world street racing game. It's called Midnight Club because you're really racing around at night and you're racing through different environments, mainly New York City and London City, and you can roam freely around the city between races. It was very unique at the time. Like, it was really all about illegal street racing through traffic, plenty of shortcuts through the cities. And, it predated Need for Speed Underground. But what was also really cool about Midnight Club is that there was police in the game. So you could actually be racing, you'd hear those police sirens turn on, and they'd start chasing you through the city. So it was just a really fun racing game. And, it started the Midnight Club series. So the first game in the series started on the PS2. And it was just really fun, really awesome racing game for the time. And there's plenty of different modes in it. So you can race through the city through waypoints. You can do, head up, one-on-one races. Rockstar really delivered with this at the time. And it was awesome to have a racing game at launch. And there was actually other racing games at launch that we'll talk about after, but Midnight Club was the game for me. Now, coming to number 4, this is a fighting game. And I talked about Street Fighter EX3, and I really liked that game, but I never ended up getting it myself. The fighting game that I loved at launch on the PlayStation 2 was Tekken Tag Team Tournament. Now, Tekken Tag Tournament was released by Namco, and its gimmick, if you want to call it that, was that you had this tag team mechanic. So you'd go into a fight picking 2 fighters, and at any time during the match, you could switch between those 2 fighters. So it was a very different style. It was the first time I had ever seen, a tag team mechanic like that in a game. Not to say that this was the first game to actually do it, but it was the first time I saw it, and I loved it. It had tons of awesome characters, so nearly every character from Tekken 1 to 3 was in the game. And I think this game was received very well by Tekken fans, and it was one of the most impressive PS2 launch titles. The graphics looked awesome, smooth animation, deep combo system, and just really fun. So Tekken Team Tournament, or Tekken Tag Tournament, was an awesome game. Loved it to death. And what I loved about this game and fighters in general at that time was the unlockables. Like, fighting games for me were always about unlocking characters. That's what drove me in those games. I love to play through, beat the game, unlock a character. And that's something I really miss with modern fighting games. Back then we didn't have microtransactions, we didn't have DLC. So they'd give you everything and they would just say, knock yourself out, have fun, unlock characters. So there's tons of replayability there. And Tekken Tag Tournament was an awesome game all around. So loved that game as a launch title. Next up, we have my favorite first-person shooter at launch on the PlayStation 2. Another first in the series, and that was TimeSplitters. Now, TimeSplitters was released by Free Radical Design and Eidos Interactive. And this game was super fun. I love the style. Basically, it's a first-person shooter. It's kind of arcade style, where you're playing through levels, playing through missions, and it has a time travel theme. So where most first-person shooters back then maintain a similar theme throughout the game, like for example, maybe it's a war game and you're just, going through a war. TimeSplitters did something different, and they gave you tons of different environments, tons of different level themes. So you might be going through, Egypt, through a pyramid, for example, and then in the next stage, you're in Chinatown, etc., etc. So you're bouncing around between all these different themes. And what was cool about this as well is that your objective in the levels was to basically go in, find an item, and then trace your steps and get back out of there. After you get the item, aliens would be warping in to try to take you out. And it really had it really had a speed run kind of vibe to it because you'd be timed through these levels, and when you'd finish it, you'd get your time. So it was interesting, kind of a very unique game in that sense. And to me, I always got GoldenEye vibes from this game. It didn't exactly play like GoldenEye, right? You didn't have all these kind of secret agent objectives, but it felt like that. This play style, the shooting style, the weapon style, and the multiplayer in this game was really fun as well. So to have this multiplayer first person shooter that gave some GoldenEye vibes, that was a big deal back then. And TimeSplitters was awesome. And one thing I also really loved about this game was the weapons. So there's some ridiculous weapons in this game, like the blunderbuss, tons of awesome weapons, variety. So TimeSplitters was an awesome game, and it launched the franchise. And the TimeSplitters series, in my opinion, would get better over time with games like TimeSplitters 2. So moving on, coming to my number 2 launch title, it has to be Armored Core 2. I was obsessed with Armored Core 2. I love the mech style. And I think why I love this game so much is that I hadn't really gotten into any games quite like this before. I had played some Mech Warrior games on the PC, but I never played the original Armored Core. So to get Armored Core 2 as a launch title, to have this giant mech where you're switching out parts, you're earning money, you're doing missions, you're making your mech better, you're switching up the weapons. It was just so fun, and I just never played a game like that at the time. So Armored Core 2, released by From Software and Age Tech, it was a mech combat simulator, and the gameplay was just so fun going through these missions, the combat. The controls don't hold up too great today, as I was playing it, capturing some gameplay footage, but I'm also rusty, so you kind of have to give it some time to adapt to the old control style. But just a great game, challenging game, and From Software really delivered with Armored Core 2. I love this game again. I was obsessed with it. I played it for so long, beat the game, just loved everything about it. Really, really got my imagination flowing. Seeing those mechs going to battle and seeing that on the PlayStation 2 at the time with those graphics really blew me away. So, Armored Core 2, love that game. So, coming to my number 1 PS2 launch title game, this was an easy choice for me. It had to be SSX. I loved SSX, one of the best snowboarding game franchises of all time. Now, the original SSX might not be the best in the SSX series, but at the time, this game was so good, so awesome, so fresh. And I had a history with snowboard games. I love 1080 on the N64. I love the Cool Border games on the PS1. But when SSX came out, they took the snowboarding genre to a whole new level. Released by EA Sports, big. It was just such an awesome snowboarding game. You had these huge, exaggerated tricks, catching huge air in the game, racing downhill, trying to come first place, and just a stylish game. Really took my imagination as well to another level, and it was just so fun grinding on rails, going down the mountain, finding secret routes. You'd see these glass SSX signs, and when you saw those, you could bust through that, go take a shortcut, a secret route. So tons of fun there. And it really showed, in my opinion, what the PS2 could do because the graphics for SSX at the time were awesome. And again, just such a fun game. Multiplayer, couch co op, tons of fun. Nothing bad at all I can say about SSX. One of the best snowboarding games, one of the best snowboarding franchises to date. And we really need a new SSX. I don't know what EA is doing with that series, but imagine if they drop a new SSX game. I'd be picking that up right away. Love snowboarding games, loved SSX, loved the arcade kind of snowboarding style it had. So, definitely my number 1 PS2 launch lineup game, and super fun to capture the gameplay footage for SSX. And I swear it holds up just as good today as it did back then. So, if you've never played an SSX game, definitely give it a try. Now that's it. Those were my favorite PS2 launch titles. And again, it's just crazy to think that the PS2 launched with, I believe, 29 launch titles. So imagine picking up the PS2 and having 29 games to play from. Those were my top 5, but there were other great games like Kessen, Ridge Racer 5, just plenty of games. Check out the list. I'm not going to read through them all here because there's a lot, but tons to choose from. So, loved the PS2 launch. And the PS2 over time developed one of the best libraries of a console of all time, I would say. Like, there's thousands of games and so many franchises, series started on the PS2. Couple that come to mind, God of War, one of the best franchises, super fun game. And getting God of War back then, doing those quick time events, seeing the fast paced action in that Greek mythological theme, God of War was awesome. That was an awesome game. We got GTA games, GTA 3, Vice City, some of the best GTA games. We got Resident Evil 4. I mean, we got Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. The list just goes on and on what the PS2 delivered. Jack and Daxter games. I mean, where does it stop? Gran Turismo 2, the Dark Cloud games. Just the library on the PS2 was incredible. So much fun. Still so fun to collect for today, although I don't really collect much for the PS2. But I mean, I totally understand people who do. The library is just so good. So shout out to the PS2. Let me show it one more time. Gotta show some love to one of the GOATs, one of the best consoles of all time. And so happy I was fortunate to have this growing up because, again, it just brought so much joy, so much fun into my life. And this video was a real pleasure to make, to think about, because I got to play through some of these PS2 launch titles again, capture the gameplay footage, and it's just amazing how well the games hold up as well today, how fun they still are. So Sony, don't forget your roots. Don't forget the PS2 and keep that energy going in the PS5 and beyond. So that's it. 25 years today. So I just wanted to come on and remember the PlayStation 2. So if you enjoyed this video, definitely give it a like, subscribe for more, and more importantly, share some comments below. Tell me some of your memories of the PS2. Tell me some of your favorite launch lineup games. Tell me some of your favorite games on the PS2 in general. I would love to hear it. Let's celebrate. Let's remember the PS2. And that's it. Have a good day.